Have you ever finally chosen yourself and instead of feeling happy or relieved, you feel guilty? Maybe you said no to something you didn't have the energy for. Maybe you took time for yourself without a reason to justify it. Or maybe you allowed yourself to do something you really wanted and then immediately wondered if you should have been doing something else. If that sounds familiar, today's conversation is for you. Because what if guilt doesn't always mean that you've done something wrong? What if sometimes it means you're just doing something differently? Well, in today's episode, we're talking about why choosing yourself can feel so uncomfortable, where that guilt comes from, and how to stop letting it make the choice for you. Come on in. It's time to choose happy. Wherever you are, whatever kind of day you're having, this is your reminder. You have a choice. If you're ready to break free from self-doubt and negative thinking, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Marie, and this is the Choose Happy with Marie podcast. Welcome. Hello, how are you? I hope you're having a good rest of the summer. I was sitting outside the other morning with my cup of coffee on my back deck, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, there was nothing I had to do. It was one of those beautiful August mornings, where the air is just, it's a little cooler, the air felt calm, and the birds were doing their thing in the forest behind my house. I remember thinking, this is nice. And then, you know what's coming? Almost immediately, another voice showed up. You should probably go start the laundry. You should answer those emails before they pile up. You should clean the kitchen while you have the chance. You shouldn't just be sitting here. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever noticed how quickly these thoughts can come into our head? 1 minute you're enjoying a quiet moment to yourself, and the next minute you're trying to justify why you deserve to have it. What's interesting is that no one was asking me to get up. No one was expecting anything from me in that moment. It was all happening inside my own head. And I realized something. The guilt wasn't coming because I was doing something wrong. The guilt was showing up because I was doing something that I don't always give myself permission to do. And that is simply enjoying my own life in my own way. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you finally said no to something you didn't want to do, and then spent the rest of the day wondering if you should change your mind. Sound familiar? Maybe you've taken an afternoon just for yourself, only to spend the whole time thinking about everything else you, air quotes, should be doing. Sound familiar? Or maybe you've bought yourself something you've wanted for months. You know that feeling? And instead of feeling excited, you feel guilty for spending the money. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes choosing yourself doesn't feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it can even feel wrong. And if you've ever wondered why that happens or why guilt seems to show up the moment you start putting yourself back into your own life, I want to talk about that today. Because I don't think guilt always means what we think it means. So let's dive in. Why does this happen? Why is it that the moment we choose ourselves, guilt seems to come along for the ride? Why not, right? I think one of the reasons is we've become so used to putting ourselves last that choosing ourselves feels unfamiliar. And what's unfamiliar often feels uncomfortable. Think about how guilt shows up in your everyday life. Maybe you've had a long week and all you really want to do is spend Saturday morning reading a book on the deck with your coffee, kind of like me. But instead of enjoying it, your mind starts making a list. I should clean the bathrooms. I should get the groceries. I should be doing something productive. Sound familiar? Or maybe someone asks you for a favor and everything inside you wants to say, I can't this time. But instead, you hear yourself saying, yes. Why? Because disappointing someone else feels harder than disappointing yourself. I'm going to pause here to let that land for you, because that was a big awakening for me too. Maybe you've been dreaming about taking an art class, starting a business, writing a book, in my case, or simply making time for something that lights you up. You finally carved that hour for yourself, if you give yourself that hour. And 5 minutes later, you're wondering if you should be folding laundry instead. Or maybe you've set a boundary. It could be you don't answer the phone when it rings right away. You let it go to voicemail. Or you don't respond to a text the minute it comes in. I know many people have to do that. I've started training myself not to do that right away. I mean, I can give myself a few minutes and finish the task at hand. You decide it's okay if someone waits until tomorrow. If you've set this boundary and somehow you feel like you've done something wrong. Have you ever noticed something about all of these examples? None of them are selfish. None of them are unkind. None of them involve hurting another person. They're simply moments where you honored what you needed, yet guilt showed up anyway. That's why I think it's important to pause here and ask ourselves a different question. Instead of asking, why do I feel so guilty? Many of my clients ask themselves that. What if we asked ourselves, what is this guilt trying to tell me? Because here's what I've come to believe. Guilt isn't always a sign that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's simply a sign that you're doing something different. And those are not the same thing. That's an important distinction, because if we don't know the difference, we'll keep letting guilt make our decisions. We'll say yes when we mean no. We'll keep putting ourselves at the bottom of our own to-do list. We'll keep believing that everyone else's needs matter more than ours. Not because we want to, but because guilt convinces us that's what a good woman does. And I don't think that's the whole story. So, if guilt isn't always telling us that we've done something wrong, where does it come from? I've thought about this a lot over the years, and I don't think most of us were ever taught to believe that our needs mattered as much as everyone else's. Instead, many of us learned a different set of rules. They may sound familiar to you. The rules of be helpful, be dependable, be the one everyone can count on, don't make life harder for other people, don't disappoint anyone. Sound familiar? And somewhere along the way, many of us learned another rule. A good woman puts herself last. If that lands with you, I want you to know you are not alone. No one may have ever said those exact words to us, but we absorb them. We absorb them from our families, from our culture, from the women we watched growing up, from the praise we received when we were easy, accommodating, and always willing to help. So, when we finally start making choices that honor what we need, our mind says the following: wait a minute, this isn't how we've always done things. And that feeling can show up as guilt. Not because you've become selfish or because you're a bad person, but because you're stepping outside of a role you've been practicing for years, maybe even decades. One of the biggest shifts for me has been realizing that I had been confusing conditioning with conscience. I want to say that again because I think it's really important. Sometimes we're confusing conditioning with conscience. Healthy guilt has a purpose. For example, if I've hurt someone, or spoken harshly, or broken a promise, or acted in a way that doesn't align with my values, guilt can be a loving reminder to make things right. That's not the kind of guilt we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about the guilt that shows up even when you've made a choice that is consistent with your values and honors what you need. You rested because you were exhausted. You said no because your plate was already full. You asked for help instead of carrying everything on your own. You spent an afternoon doing something that brought you joy. You chose yourself in these examples, and guilt came anyway. Can you see the difference? One kind of guilt invites us back to our integrity and what matters to us. The other invites us back to an old version of ourselves with stories that were told to us or that we observed. It came from somewhere. Your worth was never something you had to earn. I will repeat that because I think it's really, really important for some of us. We need to be reminded that our worth was never something that we had to earn. Choosing yourself doesn't take away from the people that you love. It simply makes room for you in your own life. Maybe that's why this feels so uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. And whenever we begin living in a new way, it can take a little time for our heart, our mind, and our habits to catch up with what we know is true. So, you're probably asking, this is great, Marie. What do we do when guilt shows up? Because it's going to show up. Well, I don't think the goal is to make it disappear. That's not realistic. If you've spent years, maybe even decades, believing that putting everyone else first is what makes you a good person, it makes sense that choosing yourself is going to feel uncomfortable at first. We can't change those patterns overnight. I'm not a magician. If I could, I would. But here's what we can change. We can stop letting guilt make our decisions. The next time you notice that feeling creeping in, instead of immediately asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Try asking a different question. Try asking this one. What old expectation am I challenging right now? I'll repeat it. What old expectation am I challenging right now? Because that's what you're doing. You're challenging the status quo. That question has changed so much for me. Because instead of assuming the guilt is telling me the truth, I'm inviting it to let me get curious. Am I feeling guilty because I've gone against my values? Or because I'm doing something I was somehow, somewhere taught I was allowed to do? There's a big difference. Maybe, for an example, you've decided to leave work on time so you can go for a walk before making dinner because that matters to you. You're trying to bring in more exercise into your life, and that's healthy living. Or maybe you want to take a walk on your lunch break. Maybe you've decided to turn your phone off in the evenings after a certain time so that you can be present with yourself and your family. By the way, I think that's awesome. More of us need to do that. Or maybe you've said no to just one more commitment because you knew your plate was already full. Maybe you finally said yes to something that brings you joy. None of those choices make you selfish. They make you human. And they remind you that your life, what you want, matters too. I think one of the greatest acts of self-trust is learning that not every feeling is meant to lead us. Sometimes our feelings are pointing us towards something important, and sometimes they're simply reflecting an old pattern that's ready to be outgrown. So the next time guilt shows up, don't rush to put it away. Don't judge yourself for feeling it. Notice it and take a breath. And ask yourself, is this guilt protecting my values or protecting an old version of me? And then get curious. Listen. Not to the loudest voice or the oldest voice, but to the truest one. The one that's been waiting for you underneath all the expectations. The one that knows you can care deeply about the people in your life without disappearing from your own. Because that's what choosing happy has always meant to me. It's not choosing yourself instead of everyone else. It's choosing to believe that your life matters too. And the more you practice that, the quieter guilt will become. Not because it disappears completely, but because your self-trust begins to speak a little louder. Before we close, I want to leave you with a Choose Happy affirmation from the card deck. This one feels especially fitting for today's conversation, and it goes as follows. I set healthy boundaries with others. I am worthy of mutually respectful relationships. I'll repeat it. I set healthy boundaries with others. I am worthy of mutually respectful relationships. If you're someone who feels guilty when you set a boundary with others, I invite you to come back to this affirmation. You don't have to convince yourself that everyone will be happy with your boundaries, because they probably won't be. They have their own interests. You can simply remind yourself that you are worthy of relationships where there is mutual respect. And if you have the card deck, consider displaying this card somewhere where you'll see it this week. Let it remind you that you can set boundaries without guilt. You deserve healthy, mutually respectful relationships. And if you don't have the Choose Happy affirmation card deck yet, what are you waiting for? It is my daily go-to. Every day I just randomly pick a card And whatever that card is an intention that I think about for the day. And it just helps us in remembering what matters. So if you are interested, I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can get your own. More than 600 card decks have been sold and shipped all over the world. And I'd love to send one to you too. So in closing, if you've been feeling guilty for choosing yourself, I really hope this episode has helped you remember that guilt doesn't always mean you've made the wrong choice. Sometimes it simply means you're making a new choice. A choice perhaps to rest, or to say no, or to follow something that matters to you, or to stop abandoning yourself in order to make everyone else comfortable. And if that feels uncomfortable, I want you to be gentle with yourself. You are not learning how to become a different person. You're learning how to come back to the person you've always been. The part of you that has dreams, that has needs, that has a voice. So the next time guilt shows up, I invite you to pause before you listen and ask yourself the following question. Is this guilt helping me live according to my values, or is it asking me to return to an old version of myself? And then give yourself permission to listen to that voice that feels most true, the one that reminds you your life matters too. And if you'd like to stay connected between episodes, you can join my email community. Each week, I send a little pause in the middle of everyday life with personal stories, reflections, journal prompts, affirmations, and gentle reminders to help you reconnect with yourself. Think of the podcast as our weekly conversation and my emails as a quiet check-in between episodes. I'd love to welcome you. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope this conversation reminded you that your voice matters, your needs matter, and your life matters too. Wishing you a wonderful week, choosing happy. Cheers! Thanks for listening to Choose Happy with Marie. If today's episode spoke to you, I would love it if you could share it with a friend or leave a quick review for the show. It helps more women find this kind of support. Remember, you don't have to overhaul your life to start feeling better. You just have to choose happy, right where you are, one choose happy choice at a time. I'll see you next time. Take care.